You know, when I was a teenager in school, I used to sit there drawing KISS stage sets. So in reality, I'm doing the band that I always wanted to do. My real name's Sean Hackett, but everybody calls me Motley. I'm the lighting designer for KISS. I do all the design the lights, co-design the set with our production manager Robert Long, who's our production designer, and the two of us bounce drawings backwards and forwards until we find something that fits. And after lots of bouncing backwards and forwards, this is what you ended up getting. Well, the first thing they want is they'd want the show to look big. They want it to look like a big rock show. And then definitely there's some moments in the show that have to be like when Gene spits blood. You know, we make sure it comes really down and it's all focused on him and try to make it really mood and scary. And there's some other small moments where, you know, Paul Stanley's out at front of house and we have the mirror ball and the introduction of Black Diamond. And then they'll tell me different things at different stages of the tour. We roll on with the ideas that we did on the last shows, and certain cues are always going to be the cues. And they always, every tour, they'll add something into the show and tell me, okay, we're going to do this, we need you to light it, or there might be a simple thing of something needs to be done on stage. So there's one part of this show that we need to put something up on stage for later in a song, so we distract the audience by sending all the lights over to stage left and the band walk over there so they can't see what goes on there. Things like when Gene flies up into the truss, you know, we light him on the way up, but he needs to get back down, so we do that in the dark and we put all the attention on the guitar player over on the side of the stage, just in a spotlight and a little bit of backlight. So they don't ask me for too much. I think the advantage was because I worked as the lighting crew chief, I knew I'd seen the show many times, and also as a teenager I was a huge KISS fan, so it helps to be a fan of the band you work for, because then you already have an understanding of what people perceive as what a KISS show is. I think the ultimate fan photograph ever done was when you get the album cover to Kiss Alive 2 and you open that album cover and there's the band on these lifts, there's these flames and pyros, and it looks like hundreds of lights, and you look at that and you think, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. Now, of course, as you work in the industry and progress, if you had that amount of equipment now, people would say, well, that's not much stuff. But in the 70s, that looked like a massive thing. So, yes, you still try to do the perception of what you saw in the 70s, which to me was a lot of colour, a lot of saturated bright lights. But of course, when you look back on those shows on videos, you think, wow, there's not a lot going on. You know, when you look at the cover of Kiss Alive 1, it looks massive, but it's just a couple of lights on ground support, old genie lifters. There's nothing up there. But at the time, that looked massive. So yeah, definitely try to replicate I try to replicate what I think I saw in the 70s. Not what I saw, because what I saw is totally different to what this is. The original design concept, it all started, before we even came up with the visual idea, it all started with a centre grid. So Robert Long, our production designer, worked out with the band that he would build a central grid. That central grid would hold a platform for Gene to fly up and land in a song that he sings when he goes up in God of Thunder. It would also incorporate a new band pod, so the band at the beginning of the show could start in the air and come down and land on the stage. And it would also incorporate winches to lift the drum riser up. We did have a drum riser that was a scissor lift the last couple of years, but the thing weighed so many tons that when we pushed it onto some house stages, we had to build big heavy duty platforms Otherwise we'd break the stage, so it was so heavy. So we were trying to get rid of that massive amount of weight. So the central grid holds 12 winches. Those 12 winches are 4 winches per pod. There's 4 on the band pod, 4 on the Gene platform, and 4 on the drum kit. So they can all be brought up and down at different times during the show. So then we had that. So then we worked out, okay, there's the first bit of our footprint. The second bit of the footprint was the video wall. We had to have a video wall. So we filled that area up. Then of course you draw the PA into place, because you know, you can come up with a great design and then suddenly forget that you need to put a PA there. Then we draw the front truss, because the front truss also holds the kabuki for where the kabuki drops at the beginning of the show to reveal the band up on their riser, on their platform when they come down. So once we had these basic elements in place, that was like the footprint of, okay, now we have all this free space. What do we do with the free space? So we picked some elements that we liked from what we did last year, which was we liked having towers up either side. But to make it different, we changed the fixture on the tower from, we originally had auroras there, like LED lights, and we changed into ACL beams. Or it could have been a magic blade, but it happened to be the company we utilised had the ACL blade beams. Then we got feedback from the band that they wanted a roof full of videos. So we'd come up with about 5 or 6 different ideas. And then when we got the feedback that they wanted a roof full of videos similar to Vegas, we thought, how are we going to do this similar to Vegas, but make it different and fresh? So we came up with the idea of having lots of video screens hanging up there. And the video screens being close to the size of an old KISS sign. So then we could have KISS logos running everywhere and also different forms of content. So of course, once we did that, the obvious thing was to put trusses in between it. Then we thought, we've always wanted to do something out at front of house where we sort of bring more attention to when Paul flies out over the audience and lands out here. So we built a mini lighting rig above him out here and put some lights underneath him. Robert Long came up with this idea of utilising these big cranes that are owned by SGPS to take 2 of the band members out over the audience at the end of the show. So we put them in there, so then once we had them, then we put lights in and we just started filling everything up and building it in layers. The workhorse of the show would be a Mach 3. Now the reason we use a lot of the fixtures we use is because of the supplier we got. We've always used Christie Lights in America. And just when we were starting to put this together, Christie Lights said that they were opening up a United Kingdom shop. So they had discussions with Robert and it turned out that, okay, that's who we're going to use. So we went with the Mach 3 because that was the brightest wash light that they have. So we sort of highlight up our Mach 3s. So that's our basic workhorse stage wash, which we get out of our Mach 3s, which of course, you know, do lots of different colours as all moving lights, you know. They do what all moving lights do, but the reason I use them is they're the brightest light that Christie Lights own. I've also done this with different forms of Robies and Vari-Lights, depending on where we are in the world and what's available by the supplier that we've given. But we need a really bright wash light to just get over all the video, because once you turn all this video on, just when you turn all that on, it just becomes so bright on stage you can lose yourself with everything else. So then the next element that we added to the show was, I've always loved the idea of that old classic light curtain that people built out of ACLs. So we just put a 56-foot back truss in there and just filled it full of Sharpies, put 3 8 inch section, so we end up with our light curtain. So that gives us our light curtain, which we can get a couple of different focuses out of. I can put it into a focus and make it look like a bunch of ACL bars in the old school, or it can be a big fan light curtain, or it can be a big straight ahead light curtain. And then we added some more Sharpies around the place, just to fill it all out and more to give it that classic, you know, 80s type rock look. Then we started building the towers. Then Robert and I discussed about what we'd put on the set and what we were going to put on the towers. And he thought, originally we went for our magic blades, but a very similar product was the ACL Bar by Elation, and Christie Lights owned some of those. So of course, instead of trying to sub-hire in something else, if there's something that's 95% the same and you own it, you're better off using that. So then we added in our layer of light curtains, or ACL bars, which we have running along the top of the set, which right now you can't see because the set's covered for the support band, and then running up and down the towers. Then I suppose you could call it a sprinkling of strobes through the whole rig. So some facing the audience and others facing the stage. And then to make the whole thing even look bigger, one of my favourite filling lights is a 101. Now I was never really a fan of the Mac 101, I just thought it was this dinky little LED light until I actually saw one turn on and realised how bright they are. So we put some of the 101s out on above the video screens all the way out stage left and stage right. Out on the front grid out of the audience we have some 101s as well to bring light out here. So we're basically lighting part of the audience sort of like a video shoot, so that when the cameras from the stage swing around the audience there's always something on it. And then we also have the huge crane arms, so we filled them up with 101s as well. So once you turn all those on, it suddenly adds like 50 more lights to the whole show. And because all the 101s are in dark spaces, they're not being blown out by the video, they actually look a lot brighter than what they really are and make the whole thing just go from big to massive. Then when we were in rehearsals, we tried the cranes out and they really wanted to accentuate the band coming out on the cranes, so then we added in a bunch of colour blast just to uplight them and to light the cranes so they stood out more. And then around the set, the set's built out of trussing with video inside it, so we line that with colour blast as well so we can tone that and change colour. And then there's a couple of our lights that we have to have. Like I always say, the two most important lights on the whole show, well, the most important lights on the show are the follow spots. Forget the rest of it. Without the follow spots, there's no KISS show because it's all about seeing the band. So you need your follow spots, your audience light, and then you need a big blocks of colour above the stage. But down in the front in the pit, we have the two lights for when Gene spits blood. And that's two old school par cans, just like they used in the late 70s, early 80s, in a green that come up and light him from below to make him look like this evil monster about to spit blood, and two strobes. And similar out here, when Paul flies out, we just have some mole phases, foot lighting to uplight it, just to make him stand out more. And they're, you know, the oldest, most primitive lights we have on the show. But if those lights blow up when they're meant to happen, oh my God, hell will come down on me. So I actually have a few backup cues, which luckily I've only used in 400 shows, I've only used twice, which is two lights from above in green, just in case the par cam blows up or something gets unplugged. And you know, thank God I've only used it twice, but at least there's a backup plan if it all goes horribly wrong. Because that's a very important part of the show, because it builds and builds and then builds into the whole Gene flying up into the sky and the whole God of Thunder, and it's all very moody and quite a dramatic part of the show that we really don't want to make a mess of. Well, I think going back into history, the very first consoles I ever used were Avos and Selcos before moving lights were ever run through consoles. So I always was used to running a show across the console. Like a lot of people run shows nowadays in cue lists where they just go next, next. I don't. I'm actually flashing buttons in time with the music and putting faders up and down. So I like how it has a lot of faders to start with. I started off moving light-wise, of course, being a very light guy in the 80s, I learned how to use the Artisan. And then the Hog came out and I played around with the Hog 2 a lot. Then I went off in the late 90s with InXS and Savage Garden. I started using the Icon console, and I loved the layout of the Icon console, how you can do things. And then one day somebody showed me a Grand MA1 and I got shown a few things about it, and I loved how you could lay things out all differently and set it up to how you wanted it. It wasn't just predetermined. And it just seemed to work. And I think the biggest transition with so many people going to MA was when the Hog 3 came out. They did something pretty strange with the software and it kept crashing. And I think they lost a lot of market share in that period because of the unreliability of it. And also they used slightly different programming methods, which didn't make any sense to me. So then I learned in I think it was 2006, I switched over to an MA1 full size and ran InXS for a couple of years through that. So by the time I started doing KISS, MA was definitely my choice. Now my first tour as a KISS LD was when I filled in for Brian Hartley, so I ran Brian Hartley's show in Europe for the second half of the a Live 35 tour in 2008. So that was already pre-programmed by Brian, so I ran a Hog 3 on that. But as soon as I got to do my own thing, I just definitely went back to the M8. Then in 2012, we did a tour with Motley Crue, Kiss and Motley Crue together. And Motley Crue's show, they had a lot of stuff time-coded to link the lights, the video and everything together. And Motley Crue's guy wanted to use the MA2, and I was still using the MA1, so it made a lot of sense to switch over to the MA2 instead of having two consoles at front of house. So we just simplified it and we all ran it off one thing, and we just loaded in our own show files. And then from that, you know, at first I was like a bit of a learning curve, and then the more I got to know it, the more I liked it. And a lot of the stuff on this I teach myself at home using MAPC, because I got lucky enough to spend a few days in Los Angeles being taught how to use it, the basics. And then when we did the Motley Crue thing, Michael Cooper, who was Motley Crue's LD at the time, you know, we had a lot of time. Every time I got stuck on something, he would come and show me and help me out on it, so that was really good. And I just wouldn't go anywhere else at the moment. It's such a great console. To be totally honest, for what I need to do to run this show, which is very simple, the Grand MA1 would still do everything I need. You know, because I'm not one of these guys that program shows with lots of macros and all this like technical stuff. Most of my stuff is I paint pictures and I call those pictures back by using my fingers. So I'm actually manually doing it. Because on this show there is no time code, there's no computers out the back, there's no backing vocals. It's 4 guys on stage doing everything live, which is exactly what I'm doing, everything live here. Now of course I have some sequences programmed, and I have video incorporated in with my stuff because I'm triggering the catalyst through it. But I just keep it really simple. Like a lot of the video, when I start a song, I'll actually start the video on a separate fader. And so the video will be running on its own fader while I'm doing my thing. And then the video, if I need to override it or add something, I may put it into a cue or change the CMY on it, or make the video strobe or change the image. But overall, I have one single video clip running in the background the whole time. So let's say a standard song. If you're looking at this is the layout of Shout It Out Loud. So I have the video on one fader, which will just run video. Now a lot of the time the back wall will have the band on it running iMag, so there'll be images of them. So that'll pretty much run. And then I would do, you know, the verse looks I have on one fader, and I'll just bang through what I need. And then if I want to change a cue, instead of having it all in the list, I'll push up the chorus. And so I ran it like that, like running it the old style. Exactly the same as how Cosmo from AC/DC would run his show. And then I would bring up the solo look and run it that way. So maybe it's me being a bit old-fashioned, but I can look at the console and I can see that blue light's on, that means the solo's running. So I always know where I am, instead of just having a big cue list and just sitting here going go, 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 go with doing bumps and stuff. So every song I lay out across like this, and then at the end of a song I'd black out. On every single page I would have the in-between look, which I'd bring up, and then I'd just hit next page and it loads in the next song. So as soon as the next song starts, I'll be sitting there listening, the band will go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I bring up the first look and the video at the same time. So the video will start running and I'll just start running the cues. Same thing, run through the whole song, yada, 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 black out, go to the next song, bring up the in-between song look, next song starts, kick it in, starts off, and then in this song we have like a big audience add sing-along, so I have that on a separate fader. I bring it up when they do what they want to do, and then bring it down when it goes back to the song. Then we go into the verse, and I bring the verse look up and bounce through that. And same with the chorus. I bring the chorus looks up and bounce through them. So it's all very simple how it's laid out. And on every page always has the audience just to my left. So for some reason the band, if they yell for the audience, I'm always ready to just bring it up. Big and simple. You know, if you make it too complex, I mean, we joke sometimes between us that KISS stands for Keep It Simple Stupid, because there's so much going on stage. At the end of the day, it's about the band and about the video. We have the video wall at the back and the video on the side, which we do put content up, but we put a lot of the band up there as well, because that's what people have come to see. So probably the easiest light on this whole show is the spotlight. The spotlight spends most of the night in white. There's a couple of times I use colour for mood in certain songs, but it's all about lighting the person. So then once you have, and you will see tonight, when you see how the band perform, they don't just stand there and play guitar, they're all over the place. You know, and I call it throwing rock shapes and doing all the moves. So they're very visual in themselves. So the light show has to be pretty simple, because when you have the video, the pyro, the band, if you made a really, really complex light show, it would all get lost. It would just turn into mud. So the idea is to have it very big and very simple, dramatic when it needs to be dramatic, so that it's like building a huge picture frame around the band, but it's all about the band in the center coming out of it. With the moving lights, just because the light is a moving light, you don't have to move it all the time. It can stay in a focus. And a lot of this show, when it moves for a reason, not just because the light can move. And the idea of the way I light this band is trying to sort of stay still true to the old style, where it was big looks, big and simple, instead of some of these shows you see now where somebody thinks the light can do some effect, so they just make them do everything it possibly can. And then it just gets lost and it just turns into mud.